Hello, everyone. Welcome again to our second episode of Time to Talk, our fortnightly live conversations about mediumship. I am Raf. This is Guilherme. Oh, where is he? Here. This is Guilherme. And we are the co-hosts of this program. How are you doing, Guilherme?
I'm very happy to be here again, hoping that we're going to have a very pleasant evening, afternoon, depending where we are, right? It's night to us here already. Good evening to everyone. And we are hoping to have fun with you again.
Yes. And just before we kick off again, let me just remind everyone that the idea behind this chat is interactions, is conversation, is to address questions, comments, cases. So keep the comments coming, type them in our comments box, and we will try to read them live. But before we go in, let me remind us about the groups that are behind this initiative. The first one is the Spiritist Society of London, SSL. Both Guilherme and I are part of SSL, and it's a study group that's based in London, dedicated to study and the dissemination of the Spiritist teachings. Every week we have meetings via SSL, both online and face-to-face. So if you'd like to get involved in participating in one of the group studies, please go follow our page on Facebook so you can get more information there. SSL is affiliated to BUS, the British Union of Spiritist Societies, and BUS is like a federation, right? It's an umbrella organization that unites a lot of Spiritist societies in the UK. The main goal is to disseminate the Spiritist philosophy as well. They are behind a lot of seminars, conferences, events, and all the initiatives. So go check them up. Left their website there. You can find more information from BUS on their website. BUS is one of our official broadcasters of this program. And our second official broadcaster is Cardiac Radio. Cardiac Radio has been bringing content about the global message, the universal message of Spiritism in English to everyone for over 10 years now. They have a lot of content available, programs, podcasts, videos, audiobooks, lives. So go check them as well. Follow them on Facebook and YouTube and take a look at their website. So thank you, BUS, Cardiac Radio, and SSL for helping us. Right. So before we go in today's theme and question, I need to say something. I need to say thank you to everyone that joined us last couple of weeks ago. It was a very good and pleasant kickoff. The interactions were coming through, so it was super nice to see everybody there. But I have to apologize. I missed a couple of questions last time. I am so sorry. I'm still getting used to it, still getting used to the tool and the format. I will promise you, I'll try my best not to let that happen again. But because of that, then today what we're going to do, we're going to start with a very quick recap of what we talked and what we saw last week. And we're going to address those questions right here in the beginning. So last week, we were talking about life after death and the different examples that we have around us, situations that happen around us, quite often, actually, that serve as evidence that there is something beyond our bodies after we die. In a few minutes, we're going to rewatch some clips that we saw last week. But before that, as I said, let's take a look at the questions that came through last time. Let me show them to you. Right. First question we received last week and we didn't answer was from Bruce, and he asked, what is the very best way to get the ego of self out of the way. And just for a bit of context, when we were talking about receiving messages from the spirits and receiving intuitions, inspirations, he sent this question. And I'm going to turn to Guilherme and say, Guilherme, what is the very best way to get the ego of self out of the way?
Well, I want to start first telling everyone that we will endeavor to answer questions that may come tonight during the life, right? In the event that we miss something or there are so many questions we cannot answer, then we'll do the same next episode, okay? So before we answer Bruce, I would like to request an assistance from part of my childhood. So I will ask Rafael to share with us something. What can we see? They are the Jetsons. And those recorders were from 1962. What do we see? Well,
I remember this. I remember this cartoon. It was just a futuristic family living in like dystopian future. A lot of technology, a lot of like different ways of living their day-to-day lives. I remember this.
But something that was very interesting, that in 1962 they were presenting in US mainly at the time classes online, video calls, working from home. And then something that was really unbelievable at the time, that was being assisted by a doctor through a video, having your consultation online. Does anyone believe that in 1962 this would be reality one day? Probably not. Do we see ourselves doing any of those examples today?
All of them, right? All of them.
Yes, indeed, all of them. So then, now I'm going back to Bruce. Thank you very much, Jetsons. And how can we separate who we are or what is coming from us from an intuition? It's not simple. Why is not simple? Because there's no perfect formula, exactly formula to tell you that's what's going on, that's what's happening, and there are differences between person to person. An intuition could be an external intuition, your guardian angel, your mentor, your friends. Many people call it then different names, but in the reality they are spirits. They are protecting us and giving us advice that sometimes we are able to perceive. Then this is not ours. It's coming from them. It may come in two different ways. We can listen to them, or sometimes they drop the information very inside our head. And we think quite obviously that we are thinking. Yes. How to differentiate that? Not simple either. There are two possibilities when we start to get this kind of intuition. An external intuition, and could be some of our own thoughts. Bear in mind that we all are spirits, incarnated or disincarnated, but we are spirits. And perhaps what a lot of people is really, really afraid on the spiritism, something called animism. But animism is something coming from your own soul, so there's nothing wrong there. Perhaps it's yourself telling you, watch out, don't go this path, try to do something else. Pay a little bit more attention in what you're doing. This is natural. How can I make a difference? And then I have a question. Why we want to make a difference? If I have an intuition, is to help myself, my loved ones, someone else in need. What is really important is the result of whatever the intuition is telling us. If the intuition is telling you to do something good, to perpetrate something that will help people, why not? Sometimes we do identify if it's an intuition or not, because sometimes it comes very often until we pay attention. But sometimes it comes only once. And then what's the difference? So, Bruce, I doubt very much anyone will be able to tell you a straight answer. That's the answer. Because I'm different than you. You're different than Raf. What is important? Yeah, carry on.
Sorry, Guilherme, let me interrupt you here. So you are saying that there are different things, and there's a separation between cases where we can actually clearly hear a spirit sending a message, and then that's a hearing kind of ability. It's different than when you're talking about the ideas that come to our minds and the thoughts that comes to our minds. But it's more difficult for us to distinguish. But we were talking about this the other day. It's important for us to understand that these things happen and they are natural. They're just part of life. But more importantly to understand than understanding exactly where that is coming from is, you're telling me, is we all have the moral compass. We all have within us the ability to distinguish what is good and what is not good, what is right and what is wrong. So at the end of the day, if the idea, the intuition, that thought is something that is asking you, guiding you, or giving you an inspiration to do something that will benefit you and others, that's what matters. And if that intuition is giving you an idea or an impulse to do something that you feel or understand that's not positive, that will be in detriment to others, or it might hurt somebody, then regardless if it's coming from you or not, it's probably something that you have the ability to stop and say, "Oh, this is not right." Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much.
Because I can easily identify cases like this, like when I am thinking about something or going through something and just trying to reflect on it, and then out of nowhere, an idea that was not related to what I was thinking about just comes into my mind, and it's like, this is just to get in the way of me fixing or solving or whatever I was involved. And regardless where it's coming from, I have the ability to just be aware of it and push it away if it's not positive, it's not good, or take it on board if it is positive or good.
Let me just give an example, right? During our last episode, we were talking about science and observation. Suddenly, we spoke about penicillin. That was not planned at all. That's not something that's part of my day-to-day thing. I do have very little knowledge of it. It's not part of my professional life either. And the information pop up. Was that an intuition? Maybe. Was that something that I heard somewhere many years ago? Maybe. Possibly, because we're talking about spiritism, we're talking about mediumship. Could have been an intuition.
You are tying this to a very good next question. But before I go to the next question, I'm happy to say that Bruce is hearing us. So Bruce, if we answered your question, send us okay. If we didn't, send us another one so we can try to be more specific. And I want to say a big hello to Natalia, Faye, Elsa, and everybody else who is joining us. Send your comments and questions so we can help our chat. Anyways,
as you talk to Bruce, I would like to say something to Bruce. Bruce, we are not. If our answer does not fulfill what you're looking for, ask again, because we don't need to rush anything. And as the name says, time to talk. We want to talk. We want to give people, if we can, information. If we cannot answer straight away, that will be our homework. And next time we'll try to answer a little bit better. So here we go.
Very good. That will lead me to the second question. It's actually the third question on the screen, which was an anonymous question asking, will they, will they give spiritual messages online as well? I'll leave it to you, Guilherme. Will we give spiritual messages online in this program?
Yes, we will.
What? Guilherme, I don't have that skill. I was not prepared for that, actually. I was quite surprised. What do you mean?
Raf, from the very first minute we start, we are giving spiritual messages. Everything we'll be talking here will be around Spiritism. What is that? What is we talking about? What does it mean? As we spoke a few minutes ago, what is an intuition? Perhaps you had an example online. What was an intuition? So everything you're going to be speaking here is indeed spiritual. But if that person is looking after a specific message for himself, like we see fortune tellers, Buenadishas in France, no, that's not what we're here for. And if I can give an advice, what we are really trying to have asking questions like that, I will not go that far. I think we have other means to fulfill our needs that do not really need to go to that kind of option, at least. In the future, we're going to talk a little bit more about those mediums that many people call fortune tellers, whatever. But it's not the right time to talk about that. So bear in mind that sometimes it's hard to understand the full idea behind the question. So we are answering two different ways. Yes, we'll be speaking about spiritual world, spirituality all the time. We will try to use simple words. We're not trying to use only words that are very technical or anything else. We're trying to be simple because that's our target. And a second way of answering this question is that, no, we will not give directly answers to a person problem, or we will not receive a spiritual message online like we see sometimes on the internet. On the internet, we can find anything, really, but that's not what we're here for.
I think the point behind any spiritual communication and so on is that what is the point behind the communication, right? If it's just to expose or to prove anything, is there actual value to it? There's just so much research and material available on that online that there isn't much value to that. The spirits, if they were involved in that, they would be involved into something that would be positive and good and bringing a message that will be beneficial for that. So having a session just for the sake of it, it doesn't really add much value to the discussion. But anyways, as Guilherme said, we are being inspired all the time by our benefactors. So in a way, we are passing on the spiritual messages from them. Which leads me to the last question, which is the one in the middle from Fabrizia. Fabrizia said, nowadays, researchers still try to say that there is no difference between brain and mind. How to explain the intuition then? We've been talking about intuition a lot, and we're going to expand a lot, but at the moment, it's widely accepted in the science world that consciousness, memory processing, the mind. It's a byproduct of our brain cells, like how our brain cells talk to one another, how they discharge information, electricity between them, energy between them. And we're going to take a look at a clip very, very soon. Last week we were talking about near-death experiences. And in those cases, there were absolutely no brain function. There was no activity in the brain, and people still had those vivid experiences with memory, knew what was going on, with feelings and so on. How would that be explained in terms of how what the mind is? The explanation is that the mind is actually not limited to our organic being, to our body. And we're going to take a look at a few more cases today, but I think we've been talking about it in the other question a little bit as well. That those examples are evidence that the brain is not composed, or the being is not just composed by our bodies and our organs.
I think, do you want to share the video now, or can I speak a little bit?
Go for it. Go for it.
I think two things we're talking here is also just an idea of things that we'll be speaking a bit further in the future, right? We are not just a body, bones and flesh. We need to understand that we are more than that. We are spirits. What is a spirit? What is made of? You know, and how many parts we have on the spirit? There is something called perispirit that we'll be speaking about that in the future. But I would like to bring your attention to something that quite often we used to say about children. Young children do not lie. They see something, they talk about it. They don't have the same ability as we mature people have to pretend to lie. And quite often kids, they see spirits. On the video, if I remember well, during the time when someone was passing away, there was a kid that was pointing to the spirit leaving the body. What is that? On the video, we also have other people with conditions that we will be speaking about that soon as well, seeing something leaving the body. What is that? If you really into that kind of thing, today on the internet, we can find even people that say they managed to get a picture of the soul leaving the body. And there's not only one, there's more than one. You can find that. So there's more than just the brain. But to try to answer Fabrizia's question, what can we tell her? We can tell her that our spirit has a body. Inside that spiritual body is where resides our soul, what we really are. So to someone to say to us that everything remains in the physical brain and that will be rotten eventually, that means there is nothing else after we die. And we have enough evidence, enough clever people, not like me, really clever people, doing a real research, writing lots of books, that can say otherwise.
Yeah. We will mention that we actually brought a few of these examples of scientists, physicians, biologists, anyways, people that are not looking at it from a spiritual or religious perspective. They investigated all, and we're going to take a look at that soon. Shall we quickly show the clip, just so it reminds us of what examples we brought last week when we were talking about is there life after death? It's a quick video. It's like 3 minutes. It's shorter than last time. And just as a quick reminder for us, let's take a look.
You're working in a hospice, and one person there that you've taken a liking to is a former merchant marine who's dying of stomach cancer. Let's call him Ron. One day you're sitting at his bedside reading to him, and suddenly you feel a great force take hold of you. Before you know it, you're floating in the air as if you're somehow out of your body. But guess what? There's another ghostly body floating in the air. It's Ron, and he looks at you and smiles. He looks very content indeed, as if trying to tell you that he's A-okay with clocking out and getting a new room in the afterlife. Suddenly, you feel yourself drop, as if your soul has joined your body again. On the bed next to you is Ron. He takes a few more breaths and dies. Ron was real. Well, according to William Peters, the man who was volunteering at a hospice when his soul left his body. But William knew that he'd experienced something earth-shattering, and so he started to research the matter. What William found out was that what he'd experienced was something that other people have experienced, and the term for it is shared death experience. The term was coined by a guy named Raymond Moody. He spent 2 decades researching what happens on the other side. Raymond said he never quite bought the idea of near-death experiences being the consequence of something called anoxia, a lack of oxygen in the brain that leads to tripping out for a few seconds. He said that it's unlikely. And how do you explain people who are perfectly healthy doing a jig with the dying? We don't have that opinion in shared death experiences because the bystanders aren't ill or injured, and yet they experience the same kind of things, said Raymond in an interview. We should add here that most shared death experiences are different from Bill's, in that people dream of the person dying, and when they wake up, that person in the dream is dead. This has happened a lot. It happened to the American artist Caldonia Curry. This is what she said. I opened the window and the snow started to come through my body, transforming into points of light that bloomed into these intricate snow blossoms. I heard my mom's voice talking to me, and I was filled with a very profound sense of well-being and love. I woke up weeping, my face covered in tears. A few hours later, her sister called to tell her her mom was dead. Back to Raymond Moody. He went on to obtain a PhD in psychology and become a forensic psychiatrist and philosopher, a writer who wrote a lot about deathbed experiences. He wrote a book about, and in it he details scores of cases where folks were clinically dead but went on a bit of a jaunt. He started writing the book after speaking to a psychiatrist named Dr. George Ritchie. George, now dead, explained that when he was 20 he died for 9 and a bit minutes. He was pronounced dead twice by the doctor, but the stubborn man didn't give up the ghost. He came back to life eventually. Raymond included over 150 cases of near-death experiences in his book. Many folks feel peace when released. Being dead is like people tend to feel ecstatic. Many of them come out of their bodies and go someplace. Many walk down a dark tunnel. And for some folks, there's a bright light at the end of that tunnel. Some others meet another being. Some go back to their past, and others visit a land of sheer beauty. Here is one story. One woman who was on her deathbed said she saw her sister Vera. She held out her hand and said hello, but what the dying woman didn't know is that her sister had passed away some 3 weeks earlier. Anyhow, she got reacquainted and then expired herself. According to that book, that kind of thing happened to lots of people.
Right. Why are we showing... Sorry, go ahead.
Let me tell you guys something. The first time I heard about Raymond Moody was a couple of days before our first episode, when Rafael showed me the video. And I could not resist. I had to learn a little bit more about this gentleman. And something got my attention straight away. So many things that we know, we take as granted in the Spiritism, is written in different words in his work. Something came straight away to my mind. Would be brilliant if one day we could have all those smart people that have different knowledge about the same subject around the table, discussing this matter, without thinking that I want to be the one that will prove life after death, that I will prove they are spirits or whoever. The day we human beings decide to be more open, to share our experience and to learn one with another, I think we'll be we'll be closer to prove what we all know, but we cannot prove yet.
I think a selfless collaboration is what you're asking for. And unfortunately, I think there's still a lot of pride in all of us that keeps getting in the way.
Yeah. But let's leave it aside. And what do you think, Raf, about we talk about near-death experience?
Yeah, I think that's good. So why are we showing the same clip that we showed last time? It's just last time we were talking about different cases that happen around us commonly, and there would be an indication there is life after death. Now we actually want to try to dig a little bit deeper into the specific cases that this cut of the clip showed us, and being the near-death experience and the shared death experience. And as we were talking about before, we have this book from Moody, and there's a recent article. It was about 9 years ago, from a biologist named Michael Nam, that was also looking into those kinds of experiences, and the similarities in these experiences, the context around these experiences, is just repetitive. It happens all the time. So it really seems like a natural occurrence. What happens? What is actually happening in a near-death experience when somebody who, in theory, is dead, has no brain activity, sees something, is able to travel and visit someone, is able to see itself outside of their body and witnessing what's going on in the room in detail, feeling things. What is that? We've been talking about how it's not our body that has a spirit. Guilherme put it in a very nice way. It's the spirit that has a body. We are actually the spirits. In a near-death experience, probably what's happening is there is a moment where the spirit is a bit less connected to the body, and therefore less limited to the body, limited to the abilities, the functions that we have in the body, that we have in our organs. And when that happens, the spirit regains the ability of understanding, seeing, feeling things outside the limitations of that dying body. Makes sense, Guilherme? What do you think?
It does. It does. It does make sense to a point that Mr. Moody decided to research something that happens when ancient Greek, and he reproduced what he called psychotion. I think that's the name, psychotion or something like that. I'll remember the name exactly. But he basically tried to simulate near-death experience through a mechanism that apparently have been used since Psychopsychotion.
Yeah.
Yes, something that has been used since ancient Greek, perhaps even before. So what does it tell us? That there was a knowledge at the time used by clever people to communicate with spirits on the other side, simulating a near-death experience. If we all decide to have a look on the internet today, Psychopsychotion, there is a lot of articles about that. The majority has nothing to do with what we're talking about, so we have to really go deeper to find those. There are scientific articles, people doing lecture about real stuff. There is a band music, there are shows, there are all sort of things with this name. But I'm saying that so people don't get confused if they go on the internet. But going back to near-death experience, how does it happen, right? And the video was giving a very good idea of how that happens, right? And how is that possible? What is the difference between a near-death experience and a shared death experience?
That's what I was going to ask you now, because if science still understands that this is caused by some sort of lack of oxygen in the brain or some issue in the brain, how would that then explain the shared death experiences?
As ever, science is very material. They only believe themselves and what they can prove basically with instruments. And they tend to tell you what they believe is the truth. There is nothing there. It's not possible. There is just a chemical reaction. It's a electrical pulse, whatever. And we can believe what they say. We can even understand what they are telling us, because they cannot prove they are right. I cannot prove that I'm right either. So there's a problem here. But when we have someone away from that equation, where has no disease, is not dying, does not have any problem, and as we saw in the video, there was even the doctor or nurse treating the patient. What else I can say to justify what is happening? And this nurse or doctor, when split from his body, let me use a very simple word, split from his body, could see the soul of the patient going away as well. How is that possible? Well, in the Spiritism, we have what we call detachment, and I'm saying split because it's easy to understand, is when our spiritual body is split from our physical body. We need to understand this concept to allow us to understand better the near-death experience and the shared death experience. We're not going into details about spiritual body or anything like that here. It's not the time for that. We're going to do that a bit further. But it's through this mechanism that it's possible to have both cases. A near-death experience, the person don't need to have anyone nearby or being able to see what's going on. That's something that happens to the individual. And funny enough, through the Moody works, we see there is a similarity of what they describe. This book in particular that has so many cases, it's amazing how they are similar.
Yeah.
What we see, what we feel, what are our impressions, and that's his work. He's comparing that.
Let me ask you a question, Guilherme, because when you were describing the detachment, this split between body and soul, in the studies of shared death experience, we have cases like these where the nurse could actually just experience the same thing as the person that was dying did. But they also said that the most common occurrence for shared death experience is actually when somebody is sleeping through dreams, that when they are sleeping, they get in contact, or they see or they receive the visit, as they say, of somebody who is ill, who is at their deathbed, and they're able to either feel some comfort or anyways, that feel the presence of that person, if not communicate to the person directly. And then after they wake up and during the day, they receive the communication that the person passed. How does that detachment that you're talking about in the case of near-death experience and shared death experience relates to when we're sleeping? Is that the same thing?
Well, we have people, they may have trouble to sleep tonight because the mechanism is exactly the same. And there are even people that can, using magnetism, giving you a push. So the principle is the same. The principle is exactly the same. And there are different ways to achieve that. I'm not trying to go deep on that way because I will mix a lot of information, and I don't think it's positive at the moment. But what you have to bear in mind that the universe has laws, immutable laws. Those laws we understand, they are from God, from the universe. Depending on your belief, you say it's from something else, but they do not change. Sometimes our perception to those laws are a bit different, but the laws are the same. And between me having a dream, a funny dream, because sometimes that's what we retain after all, and a near-death experience or shared death experience, the mechanism is the same. Is your spiritual body splitting from your body from a period, could be minutes, hours, whatever, and coming back. And then I'll make a question. Did you ever, during your sleep, felt like you falling from a couple of meters down to your bed and wake up a bit scared? Because that's very common.
I have that. Yeah, I have that a few times.
Because that's very common. Yeah. What is that? When we are sleeping, our spiritual body can remain closer or can go a bit further from our body. But suddenly, it comes back. And sometimes there's a drop. And sometimes it does scare us because we don't know what it is. Okay. So I'm just giving like an idea to people feel like, well, yeah, it did happen to me once.
Yeah.
But what we need to retain. Yeah.
So you're saying that there are similar, or in a way to understand, there are similar mechanisms. But does that mean that a near-death experience or a shared death experience can happen to anyone? Is that true?
It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell because we still do not have enough data to say that yes or no. What we can say is a person that is a medium, and I will elaborate a bit better what is a medium, has a better possibility to participate in a phenomenon like that. Let me explain first what is a medium, because when we talk about medium, what comes to your mind is straight away what we briefly mentioned that in the beginning, is someone trying to make a living, like a fortune teller, telling
you, yeah, somebody to try to get you read your fortune or a premonition of your future, tell you who you're going to marry.
Indeed, and they are out there. Don't get me wrong, they are out there.
Okay.
But what we spiritists call mediums, first of all, we don't make money at all using this, let's say, ability, this possibility. Mediums in spiritism trying to do good in the name of Jesus, of God, to help people that are in need. So I'm just saying that so people have an idea that, yeah, they are mediums.
Let me rephrase. So we were talking in the beginning about intuition, right? About how all of us have intuition, that we can receive ideas, inspiration, so on. Sometimes you know it's ours, sometimes you don't know. Actually, you never know if it's ours or not. We've been talking about that this is an example of us receiving information, communicating with the spiritual world, with spirits. And that is an example where we are intermediating an exchange between the spiritual world and our physical world. Mm-hmm. In that sense, we are what? We are in the middle of that exchange. We are mediating that exchange. We are a medium to that exchange. And I think at the end of the day, that is the pure and simple definition of what a medium. So when we say the word medium, we mean somebody that can intermediate this exchange between spirits and our world. And we are all mediums to some extent.
And as ever, a medium is like an internet. Can be used for good, can be used for evil.
Yeah.
So depends of people experience. They may feel like, oh, medium, no, this is not possible. This is people trying to make money or whatever. And depending on who you talk, like we have a pretty good number of examples in some different countries, and we see the results of what they are doing. They are helping people, only helping people. So we need to get an idea about that. And in the future, we're going to be talking about what is a medium, why we call people medium, or what is the difference between what we call a medium or non-medium. But that's not important, because to a certain extent, we all are, because we all have different sensibilities. So, but
okay. Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that in the future.
I have a concern, Rafael. I'm a very deep concern. I'm concerned about my cat, because I can see that the time's going by, and I need to show Oscar to the people.
That's fine.
I cannot finish tonight without talking about Oscar.
That's okay. I was going to ask about if you had experienced yourself. I was trying to go back to the video that we saw, right? And now the thing. If you had yourself experiences, or if you knew of experience, or if you knew of anything that connected, related to this shared death experiences, let's say. And then you want to talk about Oscar. Should I put Oscar on the screen? Let me. There you go. Who is Oscar?
This is my little friend that we can find him on the internet as well. As far as I remember, he's Crossroad Hospice.
Office, yeah.
Right?
Crossroads Hospice, yeah.
And this little fella, he used to be very shy when he arrived at this facility. And later on, they start to observe, the doctors and nurses, that every time someone was close to the due time, to death, this little fella used to go and stay closer to that person. And he's also known as a comfort cat, because every time someone was about to go, he would sneak through the corridors, jump into the bed, and would stay with the person. Well, if I was in that hospice, I would not really want to see that cat, because I'm not in a hurry. But how is it possible that this little friend is able to identify when someone is about to pass? Does he see anything? Does he feel anything? How would that be possible? So we're not going to explain about Oscar. This is just to drop something to people to think, to research. And then in the future, perhaps we talk about him again. And now we go.
Okay. Let me try to draw us back to the question that we wanted to address today, right? Which was, we are already comfortable that there's life after that. There's something beyond the body. But we are starting to look at these examples to understand, but at the moment of death, what actually happens? And we have those cases of people that see the light, see the tunnel there. They see people near them, around them. See people that have passed, have visions, go visit friends or family members. And I think the question is, at the moment of death, what is happening? Why are these things happening? One of the cases, some of the cases, they always mention the ability to see the vision of dead parents dead family members, friends that come and visit them. The funny thing is, in most cases, the visions they have are related to dead people. They never have a vision of people. Well, they usually have vision of people that are alive and come to visit them at their deathbed.
Rafael, I had a personal experience in my family, and just to let you know that one branch of my family, they used to live a lot, and when I mean a lot is above 100 years, and one of them, when he was getting closer to his departure, let me put it like that, he started to see my grandma, my uncles, part of my family that have left before us. And to my cousins, there was more like, oh, well, he's not all right, he's seeing things and he's out of his mind. But to me, knowing a little bit of what was happening, I knew that was getting closer. Quite often, those that have the merit to be escorted by their loved ones, they will. Let's be careful with the word I use, the merit. Because not everything is shining on the other side. And this is something we're going to be talking in the future.
Yeah.
So merit is very important. And that was one of the cases that came to my mind. And there is hundreds of cases, or thousands of cases of people describing exactly the same. So very common that when we are about to go, because we start to release a little bit from our body, our spiritual body start to detach a little bit, we start to have the ability to see beyond our own eyes.
We have an option here to take a look at other example. We're talking about the detachment again and this disability and so on. And we have other cases I also saw last week, which is what they call the terminal lucidity. That would be, again, very tough to explain without understanding this ability to detach and leave the body for a little bit, let's say, or be less limited by the condition you have in your body. Shall we take a look? It's a 1 minute and a little bit.
Yes.
That's a super quick one. Let's take a look.
Something called terminal lucidity? We guessed you hadn't. It's quite the strange phenomenon. What happens is a person is very ill, physically or mentally, but then they suddenly become better, and then they die. They might be suffering from a severe psychiatric or neurological disorder, unable to do anything, never mind communicate. And just before they pop their clogs, they get up and seem totally normal, like completely fixed, talkative, happy, not sick at all. It's as if they're allowed one last goodbye before they conk. The last case, the strangest of all, was in Germany. It sounds unbelievable, and there are those that doubt it happened. But it is a fact that respected physicians witnessed it and wrote about it. It's about a 26-year-old woman named Anna Katharina Emmer. She was committed to an asylum and was looked after by two well-known physicians. This woman had been severely retarded from birth, never able to talk, never able to properly feed herself. She pooped and peed herself every day. So one day she was in the hospital bed after having her leg amputated because of osseous tuberculosis. Her family were there because the doctor said she wasn't going to make it. This woman that had never said a single word or recognized a family member, suddenly started chatting with everyone there. She was overjoyed, intelligent, and happy to talk about life. She talked and laughed and smiled so wide. Half an hour later, she was dead. This is a true story. It's been talked about in journals, and no one, we mean no one, has ever been able to explain what happened.
Well, we have one example, right, given to us by this cartoon type of thing that's brilliant. I will start to explain with questions. How is that possible? That someone that never learned how to speak, as was described, was able to talk. How do we learn to speak ourselves? Take a couple of years, right? We start to mumble, we start to pronounce words. Then a year later, we start to make more sense of what we want. We would not be able to learn to talk in minutes. So how can I explain that? Well, yeah, carry on.
No, I was just going to say this. This isn't an isolated case. I mentioned before that there was this in 2011. Michael Nanda, he published this article. It's called "Reflections on the Context of Near-Death Experience." In that article, he mentions 85 cases to his knowledge of similar conditions, let's say, similar situations.
Well, we need to understand that our physical body is a kind of buffer to our spiritual body, to our soul. If you do have a limitation, a physical limitation in our body, it will restrain our ability, the ability of our soul. Can we conceive someone without legs walking on his legs? No, we cannot. Can we conceive someone with a severe brain damage talking, doing some complex activity? Very unlikely. But we need to understand that we are not only our body, our physical body. We are more than that. And when, in that particular case of Anna, she had a half an hour glimpse where somehow she was able to access what she had in her spiritual body, despite the limitations of her physical body. But that did not last long, right? It was half an hour.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to need to talk about their bodies, what they are, and how many different situations that may come along with that. But we need to understand that basic, to wrap up what we're talking today, because time's going by, it's flying. At that particular time, her spiritual body split a little bit from her body, physical body, and that was what allowed her to express herself without having much difficulty, as they describe it. She was chatting, having conversations.
I think, to be honest, it's difficult to explain all of these cases. It's difficult to explain them without the understanding of like this detachment, this effect of detachment of the body and the soul and the spirit. But as you said, we are getting close to the end. I'm just gonna run a little bit over, but I don't think we answered the question, what happens when we die? And one thing that I would say is, how are we supposed to know? Nobody came back to say anything, to tell us. And anybody died and came back to tell us what happened when they died?
Well,
so
we may have a long discussion here, right? Because when we spoke about psychomantium, when we spoke about mediums, there's something there, you know? Otherwise, we have a lot of crazy people, right? Because they are, through the spiritist entities, houses, facilities, however you want to call, they have regular meetings with spirits. Are you saying they're all crazy? No, there's something there, right? There are scientific studies that can give us more information. If we speak about Allan Kardec, what he did was a scientific study written in thousands of pages. But I'm afraid we don't have time to talk about that today.
No, but it will leave us with a hook for next week. Before we go, I need to give a thank you to everybody that joined us. Elsa, Bruce, Faye, Natalia, Edson also joined us from Brazil. Say hello to everyone. And when we were talking about mediums and the ability to intermediate and so on, and having the phenomena happening in some places, Elsa shared with us here, the bus shared with us that there are very nice spiritualist mediums and in wonderful spiritualist churches services. For example, this Poole Christian Spiritualist Church. Every fortnight they share Joanna de Angelis talks organized by the Spiritist Society of Bournemouth. And they conclude their message saying that the intention is everything. And I think that's probably a good rule to take pretty much in anything, because we were talking about intuition. I think the intention, or if it was a good or bad one, that's what it matters. We were talking about ability to communicate with spirits and bring messages and so on, same thing. What's the intention behind the medium to bring the message, to prove that that is happening? So they think trying to see things from the intention behind them is a good way of understanding if where they're coming from and if they should be trusted or not. Right. That was a lot. I think there was a lot of discussions. I think we covered detachment as an explanation for many of these cases. Let's see what will be left for next week. I think next week we'll probably continue in the what happens when we die kind of question. Let's see what we can bring to take the discussion further. And thank you everyone again. Keep sending the messages. I'm gonna leave here in the end a QR code. If you don't feel comfortable sharing your comments and questions live, or if you don't watch us live, watch the video afterwards, you can click on the link or scan the QR code and send your anonymous comment and message, and we'll bring them in the next time. That is it for me. Guilherme?
Well, thanks a lot. I had a wonderful time, and I hope you had as well. And I hope everything we spoke here somewhere along the line will help someone, because that's our main target. Someone that are in need of this kind of conversation, those thoughts, you know. And
Yeah.
see you in 2 weeks' time.
See you in 2 weeks. Bye.